Servus, Matthias Eichler here, and this is another fine episode of Single Track. You guys know that I'm not just a podcaster, but I also direct trail races, or really want to if COVID would allow it. And Rock Candy Running is my trail race organization. At rockcandyrunning.com, you can learn all about the races, the places, and the stories behind everything that I put on this coming year. So this March 4th through the 7th to be precise, I'm kicking off my race calendar with the Virtual Vert Challenge. I'm bringing back this crazy virtual race that calculates your efforts using a crazy formula inspired by the way UTMB calculates its qualifying racing points. How does that work? Well, you take one run and to your distance in miles, you add your vertical feet, which you've divided by 100, and then to that, you add the repetitions that you're running on your local hill. That's your score, not your speed or your overall mileage, but what will make you win this event is this magic number. And especially the reps on the local hill will really count for a lot. This makes it the perfect race for when the mountain summits are still full of snow and your vert chasing has to happen closer to town. Last time we hosted this event, we had people doing silly repetitions in staircases of parking garages. It was bonkers. So if you were up for a crazy virtual vert challenge, and this race is for you, visit rockcandyrunning.com to learn more and come chase vert with us this March 4th through 7th. Folks, every so often I come across a project, an idea, an inspiration a person pushes out into the universe, and I light up. I get excited and I know it's worth sharing. This is what I felt when I heard of Women Who FKT. This encouraging, challenging, and inspiring project was dreamed up by Marta Fisher and has now a whole team of people working on the goal to set as many women FKTs as possible in Oregon and Washington this year and flip the statistic, so to speak. But I shouldn't tell you that story, but let Marta Fisher share that story herself. This is another episode of Single Track, and I am sitting down, obviously virtually, with Marta Fisher. I'm pronouncing your first name correctly?
Yeah, you got it exactly right.
Perfect. So I don't actually know you, but I found out about you through Instagram. In fact, Jason Hardrath shared your big, giant project that you're working on with me a couple weeks ago, and I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds super exciting, and it's 2022, it's the beginning of the year. People need something to get excited about, motivated about, and that's why you're on the show. But before we dive in, hello to you, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I was actually really wondering how you heard about our project, because in looking at your previous podcast, I could see several possible routes, and I wondered which it was.
Exactly. I think Pacific Northwest centric. I think there is something there where I saw who followed your main Instagram account, and I was like, oh, okay, the usual suspects are already on to this. So this is super exciting. Yeah. But Marta, before we dive into this project, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you run.
Who I am and where I run. I'm a runner from Portland, where I run a lot in the Gorge and I think a lot in the Tillamook State Forest. I have been a runner since I was a teenager, and so that's, like almost 2/3 of my life right now. I think one of the important things about running for me is I feel like it's going to be something that will be a part of my life, hopefully for all of my life, but I definitely know and think about like how my running changes over time. And sometimes I get excited about one aspect and just kind of, change direction and it becomes something else. Sometimes it is, support while I'm actually more focused on other things. And sometimes it's kind of like my main recreation. So, right now I'm an ultra runner and trail runner. And I think through the pandemic and some injuries that came up before that, it kind of had become a smaller part of my life. And now I see it like growing again. And that's like really exciting to be picking this back up. So
I think that's the beauty of running, and especially trail running, that it allows us to sort of we can take the sport with us and redefine it as we're going through different phases in our lives. I know I'm from Germany. I grew up playing soccer, and I know a lot of people who sort of hit their adult phase, mid-30s or so, and all of a sudden playing soccer on a soccer field against opponents became too dangerous for injuries. And, everybody, pulls their knee or whatever. And then after a while, they're like, you know what, I think I need to be done with playing soccer. Or skiing can be similar from what I hear. I don't ski, but then people sort of do it for a while. And after a while, it's like, I get too old. But I don't think trail running is that. I think we have the ability to redefine that for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be always competitive. And I think that's the beauty of our sport.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I have appreciated about running is seeing how it changes with me and, how I change through it, kind of like, it's a two-way street, obviously, but yeah, like I've appreciated having it with me as a partner in so many different parts of my life. So.
Yeah, for sure. You said you started running as a teenager. Do you remember what and when the transition happened to trails? Because I would say probably as a teenager you didn't run on trails. Trails is somewhat a newer sport, right?
Yeah, the trail aspect is new, and I think I seem to recall at some point in maybe college or high school being like, I'll try running on this trail, and being like, I'm tripping and stopping and walking all the time. I don't know about this. And I kind of stuck to the rows for a while after that. I think the transition really happened to trails as a truly separate discipline when I was in graduate school. And I was in graduate school in Flagstaff, which I don't know if you heard, but Flagstaff has some trails.
Do people run down there? I don't know.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. So I ran into somebody who was like, oh, we've got this trail running group, and it's on, I don't remember what it was, like Wednesday nights or Saturday mornings or something. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that. That was a point where I wasn't doing much with my running. And so I'm like, yeah, having a group of other people that are running, like I was in grad school, that was my main focus. And so having something where I could like do a little bit of trail running. And that's when I started seeing trails as a separate discipline from the, road running, that I'd done previous to that.
Amazing. So I'm not gonna go down your ultra sign up list, but give me a couple highlights, and it doesn't have to be races at all, but moments where you felt like this was magical, a particular place or particular race, a highlight for you that you'll always look back fondly, or challenging, but you remember it because of what you carried with it.
Boy, that's a good question. Let me think about like the tempting thing when you say that is I want to tell about where things went well. But I think, you know what? I think I'm going to choose two things, and one where things went well and one thing where things went poorly.
I like it.
So the first one, it was my first 100. I decided to do Leadville as my first 100. I'm trying to think, like, I was like, oh, I can do this. I'm just going to come out and I'm going to do great. And I'm going to fulfill all my expectations for hundreds. And it'll be fine, which meant I started way too fast and things totally fell apart. And I finished that crying, like not just crying for like, oh, I'm at the finish. I'm crying for the last like mile or whatever. I feel like I was like crying for about like 10 miles at the end there. I mean, it was truly miserable.
Yeah.
And the good moment then following that up is I was not prepared to do another 100 at that point. I was like, no, I'm not doing one of these. The 50Ks are fine. Maybe another 50 miler. That's fine. But I did decide 2 years later, I was like, you know what? I'll try another one. I'll give Cascade Crest a shot. So I started Cascade Crest terrified because I was like, I do not want to feel that bad ever again. And so I dialed things way back. I stopped and took care of myself the whole time. Like we got to I think it was the second aid station. I was like, I have a tiny bit of a hot spot. And like it's the beginning of the race. I'm feeling good. I'm like, no, I am sitting down in the aid station. I am pulling the blister repair things out of my pack, and I am taking as much time as I need to patch up this tiny hot spot that is not yet a blister. And so I was like, okay, I'm just keeping things slow, and I keep it slow. When I saw my first crew stop, and I was like 25 miles, and I was like, I can't go any slower. Like it was difficult for me to go that slow. And yet, like, I started passing people. And at the 50-mile aid station where I was supposed to pick up my pacers, I was so far ahead of schedule, they were still napping in the car. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll leave without a pacer. Tell them I'll see them at the next stop. Things just started going well from there on out. Nice. And I did hit some more struggles along the way. But that was just such a fundamentally different experience that I really feel like the contrast between those two races has really stuck with me. And it has definitely played out to where that is how I try to manage all my races and runs is I know that contrast, and I'm like, I know how miserable I felt the first one. And I know how going slow and taking care of yourself in the beginning, really paid off towards the end of, pays off towards the end of a race. And so that is something that has stuck with me throughout my running ever since then.
Yeah. And I think with 100-miler, I don't have a lot of experience on those really long distances, but I think with shorter distances, people might say, if you start too slow, sometimes you have a hard time really making up time. But I don't think that really applies on a 100-miler. I think 100-milers are so long that...
It doesn't apply on a 100-miler, and if you think about it, it really doesn't even apply down to you get into a marathon that's on roads and that you're really cruising, or some of the faster 50Ks, yes. But I mean, there are a lot of 50Ks where it kind of doesn't, where if you're an hour slow, you still have 3 hours, you still have a ton of time that you can make up. And, that hole was so deep,
Yeah.
That hole was so deep at Leadville that I just I realized it was not just that I was walking. It was that I was stumbling along. I saw somebody else who had poles, and I was like, I could push her over and take her poles, but that'd require too much effort. You just realize that you can always speed up, and you can make up quite a bit of time if you're passing people out at the end and getting excited for doing better. But once you get into that hole, you just can't dig yourself out, you're going from, oh, I'm not running the 15-minute miles, I'm running 40-minute miles.
Oh, I know all about that. I DNF'd 2 big races last year, so I know all about those holes that are really hard to dig back out. I'm glad you were able to finish Leadville. Now, you mentioned 2 races, and I asked you specifically about races, but let's switch gears a little bit and talk about times we spend outside that are not a part of a race. Because the big project that you're working on is beyond races, is on a completely different playing field. And so I'm curious how... Share some moments, what are your routes or times when you were out there on these runs? Was it just training runs, or do you go out and find to specific routes where you can just sort of disappear and have an adventure, where the bib and the sort of structure of the race doesn't matter, and it's all about your own goals that you're setting yourself?
Oh boy. You know, in some ways you're talking about, I think you're asking about like the adventures that I do.
Yes.
But the answer that I want to give you has more to do with the people I do them with and about the relationships I form with the people I'm doing them with. And which isn't to say I don't adventure on my own. You know, I feel like I've been running alone I have been running alone for the better part of 2 years now. But a lot of my adventures really, like, they don't really become important till I've done them with a friend.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think of an example of that, and nothing is coming to me right now.
I think you make an interesting point though, and that is that once you can sign up for a race all by yourself. And I mean, yeah, if you go for a super long ultra, you might have a crew and paces, but even that you don't have to have. And that's one of the beauty of races, is that you have the ability to sort of go and run a route, run in an area that you don't know anything. You just sort of, you follow the flags, you follow the course markings. And that's what makes the sport, I think, accessible, especially for people who might not have training partners or might not have people that they can go out on adventures with. But it's true that I think adventures for me too are something that I mostly have with other people. And so then sometimes it's less about the place and more about the times with the people. I think that's an interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you talk about the races as being something you can do on your own, but they also can be a place where you meet the people.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it takes showing up to the group event to find the people that you can do the independent adventures with.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Especially because Strava doesn't have the direct messaging. You can't look at someone's Strava and say, you know what? I think the person runs routes that I would want to run. Let me just quickly check in with him. So I don't know. I agree with you. I mean, I don't think, I'm not trying in any way sort of create any kind of tension between the adventures and the races. I think they run in parallel. But I do feel, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I feel like, and I often bring this up on this show, and that is that I'm a runner who didn't come into running from this route that a lot of other people came in, which is they might have run in college or in high school, and they sort of have this cross-country career, and perhaps that's how they sort of, as they're aging, they realize, okay, they can't be competitive in marathons anymore, or so, and they start enjoying trails, and so they find a place in trail running, and running gives them this consistency that they've experienced all throughout their life. And for me, running isn't that at all. I enjoy running, but for me, I come to it more from this hiking, mountaineering experience, and I just love being outdoors. And for me, running is a great way of sort of seeing a lot in a short period of time, right? And I struggle with the structure of a training plan because I didn't come from the side.
You know, it's funny that you consider yourself the outlier, because I consider myself the outlier. I feel like the people that I meet almost all came to running from somewhere else, and often from, like, they had some background of being active in some other area. But I feel like there are a lot of people that I meet nowadays that are like, Well, I used to do X, and I started moving away from it for, whatever reason. And then I took up running to be active, and now that's what I do. And I feel like a little bit unusual in the fact that I have been running for so long. You know, and maybe that's just in trail running that the people who've been running for a long time are still like stuck on the roads and tracks, and I'm like, nah, I'm done with that.
No,
So,
it could be. I think that there's a good mix of people that come from both sides, and they approach running from these different areas, and they find themselves all on the same trail. I don't think that there is any tension there in any way. But when it comes to your project, and I'm trying to tease it in a right way so we can start talking about it, is it requires something that is more akin to mountaineering, I would say, because setting FKTs requires a pre-planning and getting comfortable with the terrain and with the area that you're planning on running that is not necessarily required when you're signing up for races as much.
That is very true about FKTs. They require a very different level of planning than walking into a race, and planning not just for your like day-to-day preparation, but for like the event itself. For a race, you need to like figure out where the start is and kind of have an idea, like, is it a hilly course or a flat course? And, you show up and the flagging's there, and they've got bibs for you, and they've got photographers, and they've got people to clean up the course, and they've got safety there for you, and they've got, like all of that is taken care of. They've even got shuttles if it doesn't start and finish at the same spot. Yeah. With this project, it is focused on FKTs, and so that means people are going to have to do a different kind of planning than they might be used to with other running. And I realize we're talking about my project, and we haven't really mentioned what the project is yet. Is it time to do that?
Let's do it. I was teasing it up as long as I can. Let's talk about women who FKT.
All right. Well, good, because I am done with the teasing.
Good.
Women who FKT is very simple. We would like to make this the year that there are more FKTs set by women than by men in Washington and Oregon.
Okay.
That's it. It's very simple.
I love it. I love FKTs.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I needed to tease it so much is because I am in love with FKTs, but I find it challenging because I'm slow. So I have to do only known times. I have to create my own route and then run it so I can say nobody else has done it because everybody else would be faster than me. But I love the entire concept of it, and I love what it brings to the sport. And I think has seen such a huge explosion during COVID when races were canceled and people needed to find something to do. And now that races are back, I don't know if people are going to FKT as much as they could, and I'm disappointed about it. And so I love that you bring that focus into this year.
Well, I think they will probably be FKTing less than they were in the pandemic, but I also think that that they're not going away because they are like kind of a different alternative. We talked a little bit about my running background. We didn't really even get into my hiking background, which is entirely separate. I worked for the forest. My background is that master's degree I was getting was in forestry, and I spent 7 years, I think, working for the Forest Service and some other time in other environmental fields. My work has changed now, but I still have that hiking background in addition to my running background. So that was one place that trail and ultra running, I kind of married these together. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I haven't been doing as much of not that I haven't been doing hiking or, using my hiking and backcountry experience. But I've kind of been sticking to trails and well-known routes. And I think this project is going to take me more in some of that backcountry stuff that I haven't really done since I left the Forest Service. So this is going to be interesting, and hopefully I have not forgotten everything, and hopefully I am not overestimating my abilities, but we'll see how it goes.
Amazing. So women who FKT, let's break it down. Fastest known time, we've talked about on the podcast many times. All my listeners should know the website fastestknowntime.com. The basic idea is pick a route that is somewhat replicatable, not something just from your house to the grocery store, and that can you submit the route as a sample, and then you attempt a fastest known time, and other people can then replicate this route, and that brings an excitement about the place this route is placed, and it brings an interesting level of competition, because it's so very personal, because you're not going to end up with 25 people all at the same time chasing the same route. I mean, I think it was a huge anomaly last year, I guess 2020, when within like a 2-week period, people were bouncing the FKT and the Wonderland Trail back and forth as if it was a walk in the park. I'm like, everybody somehow decided to run at the same time. That usually doesn't happen, even though obviously these mountaineering routes require particular weather. So you have the experience out the backcountry. You know that you can run long distances. What made you decide to make this a project and to invite other people in, rather than just, this year I'm focusing on FKTs?
Yeah, that's the good question. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, we are going to be going back to races just a little bit. So one of the races that I did this year, almost the only race that I did, was Hard Rock. So that was a big deal.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, this race somehow came down.
Yeah. So a couple of things around that experience. This year there was some talk about like how small the women's field was. Mm-hmm. And so we had a Women of Hard Rock, I don't know what you call it, a little conference or whatever beforehand. And that really got me like kind of jazzed. Like beforehand I was worried about like my performance, how am I going to do at this race? And like, am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? And then after that Women of Hard Rock, like 2 days before the race, I met half of the other women who were running the race. Here I am sitting next to Pam Reed, total buddies with Pam Reed now. Okay, maybe not buddies, but I got to chat with her a couple times. Like I was a little starstruck. So, and I didn't feel like it was necessarily just me anymore. Like I still wanted to do well. I still had goals for myself. But I also felt like every woman that I passed in that race, I made sure to check in with her. Not that I passed a ton, but just anybody I crossed paths with, I was kind of like, you doing okay? Kind of pulling for them, being like, okay, I hope you finish. I hope you do great. I hope all your dreams come true.
Yes.
So that changed a little bit. And then I finished, and like I said, I've been dealing with some injuries that I went into that race thinking like, okay, maybe this is my last 100, because maybe this isn't the aspect of running that I need to be focusing on anymore. And I didn't have the time I wanted, but I came out of that race so ready to be an ultra runner again. Like I felt very confident, and the problems I ran into were the sort of run-of-the-mill things that could happen in any long race like that were totally unrelated to my injury. And I'm like, no, I can still be an ultra runner. I am like all of these things that I was like, maybe I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm like, okay, I totally can. So I felt like I'd gotten something of myself back after that race.
Yeah.
And I also didn't know what to do with that energy. Like Hard Rock was a goal I'd been working for 7 years. And you can't just be like, well, now I'll go do this one thing or that one thing or, and that will replace this goal that I've had for nearly a decade now. You need something a little bit more than that. So I was kind of eyeing some FKTs and I was like, well, I could do this or I could do that. And they sounded great. Like there are some lovely routes. I didn't get into looking into coming up with my own routes a lot at the time, but like that was also a possibility. But it wasn't really grabbing me. But as I'm kind of like thinking about it and playing with this, and I just start noticing how many established routes there are that just don't have a women's time. Mm-hmm. And they weren't, it's not like they were all like, oh, you need to be an experienced mountaineer to do that. And it's like a super remote place. Like some of them are right close to Portland here. Some of them are established trails, like that you're like, wait, nobody's done that just to be like, okay, there's time now. Mm-hmm. So as you look at like more and more of those like different, like great ideas that you're like, oh, that looks beautiful. Oh, that looks, that looks cool. That looks cool. And you realize it's like more than I can do. And how am I going to decide between these? And then I realized, thinking back to that before Hard Rock, it's not about me necessarily. What if this isn't me? What if this is us and we are all doing this? Mm-hmm. And so that was something that I like got excited about. That was something where I'm like, okay, I can latch onto this and I can make that a goal, is that we do this,
I love
having
it.
been one of the, I'm so excited. I'm kind of jazzed here. So
no, go for it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I love it.
So it just, it just like, God, I'm so excited. I've totally forgotten what I'm talking about, to be perfectly honest. But, that felt like something that hit so many of the things that I wanted. Like it allowed me to like, mentor other people into this sport so that the next time I run Hard Rock, I'm not one of 15 women, that I'm one of, 30, mm-hmm. Or 40 or 70 or 150, who knows, and it also, kind of allowed me to take a look at a different aspect of the sport that I haven't done much with. I didn't set my first FKT until I already had this idea and was working on, we were working on putting it together when I was like, okay, I need to have some experience. I'm going to go run an FKT here.
Nice. Yeah.
So it was fine. It was a lovely experience. Somebody should beat my time. But like, it wasn't about that one FKT. It was about starting something. And so I'm like, okay, I need to do this so that I can have a little bit of like experience with it. And then we'll really go into next year and we'll get some people going. So, yeah.
And the project and the inspiration and the way you go about it is totally after my own heart. I would do the same thing. I would also find more enthusiasm and passion out of myself if I can create something that is not just for myself, that immediately includes other people, and opportunity, either through inspiration or education and actual tutoring or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. So I totally love this. For our listeners, do you have the numbers in front of you? How many FKTs are there in Washington and Oregon? And how many would have to be set by women this year in order to flip the statistics, as you call it?
Well, you're making me very proud because I looked these numbers up right before so that I had them at hand.
Yes.
So in Washington and Oregon, there's 353 routes and variations. So that means, for example, with the PCT goes through both Washington and Oregon, and it is one route, the PCT, but it has some variations. It has south to north and north to south and yo-yo and winter. I think that's it. But there's like 4 or 5 variations. So I'm counting those all separately.
Okay.
So there's 353 of those. And exactly 145 of them, so that's less than half, have any kind of women's time on them. Not necessarily that they've been like beaten 3 times, but just like one woman has gone out and done it. Mm-hmm. And that's, that seems pretty low to me. Looking at like over the course of last year, and I will warn you, I pulled these numbers at the end of October, so like there could have been a couple of other FKTs registered after I got these. But in 2021, there were 192 new FKTs that were set, and just 32% of those, so about 62, were set by women. So we're kind of thinking, assuming that as things open up a little bit more, maybe there's not likely to be a big increase in FKTs in the next year outside of our project, I think. So we're looking at, somewhere in the range of like 100 to 150 FKTs. And, I think that's entirely possible. We've got 150 women who are interested in the project. Not all of them want to set a route. Some of them are interested in supporting. But I definitely think there's some real possibilities to get some times on some of these routes, to introduce some people to some new terrain, for people to try out something different, and also to learn a little bit, to be like, okay, if they're coming to this from a running background, to say, okay, what are some of these like mountaineering skills that I need to learn to be able to do 20 miles in the backcountry? Mm-hmm. If they're coming from more of a hiking background, then it would be more about like, okay, here's how you move fast over some of this, or fast-ish, I guess, over some kind of stuff that you're used to just, plodding through and doing 10 or 15 miles a day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What I love about the FKT, and I want to mention it for the show, in case certain listeners don't know about it, is that the fastest known time website will only register your time if you actually beat the person that's currently listed there. So if you make an attempt and you come in 10 minutes later, then you've had a great experience, but you won't be listed on the website. But what makes it so fantastic is that there are so many routes and so many variations that there are a ton of opportunities that are ripe for the picking. Like if you are a casual runner, then you're not going to get an FKT at the Wonderland. It's a highly competitive route, and you'll waste your time if your goal. You will never waste your time on the Wonderland. It's beautiful, but you'll waste your time if you think you'll have a chance of getting on that website. And that's what makes the website great, is that there you can peruse there and you find and you get inspired. I mean, even if it ends up not you finding something that doesn't make you want to do an FKT, you might find a cool route that you want to do. But there are so many variations where you can just go out and essentially some of those times, as you say, some women have never set a time. The times have been set once, like that FKT that I put down on a route that I put down could easily be beaten because we did it for the first time and we did it in really mediocre conditions. So anybody could come in and crush that. So I think somebody who knows, can read some maps, and I think that's the other big component that needs to be acquired in order to make this FKT thing something that one wants to really do, is you need to be able to read maps. You need to be able to really kind of look at a route and make this your project. That might mean taking a stab at different sections in small chunks before you attempt the whole thing, right? You have to sort of get into this mindset of wanting to do a project like that and almost set yourself a training plan, just like the way you would train for a race. It just might mean you acquire a different skill or you practice a different skill, if you will, because you sort of get ready for doing a route like that.
Yeah, some of these are going to require some really detailed, route scouting and that sort of thing. Because some of them are going to be first fastest known times, I think that's going to change the expectations a little bit. Then if you're trying to beat somebody's time, then you really do have to even if it's a slow time, you're like, even if you feel like it's a very beatable time and that you have the skills and you're like, yes, I have the stuff to do it. You still do have a standard that you're trying to meet. And so you really want to do the training to get there. For some of these first times, I feel like, this is the start of a conversation. And, I think it's possible, since we are focusing a little bit on quantity here rather than quality necessarily, that, some of these first times we're like, let's get a time out there. Let's set a standard so that somebody has something to work for. And I sincerely hope that some of these times you're like, yeah, I could have done way better, but I only scouted it once, but I was like, let's give it a try, So I think it's going to be different doing some of these where there is an established route. So I think if you're creating a route, I think that's going to require, again, a little bit more planning. But if you've got an established route, that's a little help you've already gotten. And then if there's no standard that you need to beat, then it's kind of like, let's put a time up there and then let's see where the conversation goes from here. Yeah. And so that's something we've really been trying to stress to our participants who are saying, well, I don't know if I'm fast enough. It's like, well, I see this as I've been looking through routes to try to give women examples of you could try this or this. I've looked at some of the men's times, and I very often see that the first time that's put up might be 9 hours. And then the second time that's put up is much faster, at 6 hours or 5 hours. And so I feel like, we can do that too. Maybe the first person that goes out is uncertain of herself and she's not used to this kind of running and doesn't feel great but has a good time and sets a time up there. And then maybe she looks at that and says, well, now that I know that, let me try to beat my own time. Yeah. There's so many possibilities and opportunities here. We have had to be a little bit attentive to some of the shorter routes, particularly have Strava times, that, somebody has run the route. This is how common some of these routes are, is that one of them that doesn't have an official FKT time on it is, the Mount Defiance in the Columbia River Gorge. I ran that 5 times during my hard rock training. Yeah. There's a Strava time for it. And so for some of those, we are having to look into the records and try to find out if there is some time that we do need to beat. But we're trying to do that because we do want to give anybody who's done a great job on a route, we want to give them as much credit as possible. But.
So let's talk about the practical piece, because you've done more and you're planning to do more than having done the research and sort of putting the shout out and creating a hashtag. You've had a meeting this last week where you said 150 people, women, have shown interest. And talk to me a little bit about the steps that you're planning on doing throughout the year in order to really make sure that women have the support that they need in order to attempt something like that.
Yeah, so we did have a meeting this last weekend. It was just kind of getting things off the ground. So it was more about meeting each other than necessarily giving a lot of information. We do have some other kind of, more informational stuff coming up. We're planning another meeting in February. I think it's February 10th. It's going to be a Zoom meeting where we're kind of getting into some more of the nuts and bolts of setting an FKT if you've never done one before. To go through, some of those planning things that are required. We have had a lot of questions about some different aspects, what does supported versus unsupported mean? And so we want to make sure that we have a chance to answer those questions. What we also are setting up a Slack channel, and that we just introduced people to it at our meeting the other day. So if you haven't used Slack, it's a messaging channel where you can set up a room to talk about a topic, and people can, like anybody who's in the group can kind of go in and check that out. And we're thinking that's one way to keep people connected. So that is starting to take off. We've had some conversations going in there about just setting up group runs to meet each other. Another thing that we're doing is I have this spreadsheet that I came out with of like, here's all the routes that just don't have a women's time on them, and take a look and see if there's something on here that you want to take on. And then if people email us that, hey, I think I want to attempt this route, then I will mark it on there as like somebody's planning an attempt. So, we can't reserve the route for you, and I wouldn't want to, but we can at least say, hey, somebody's already working on this one. So if you want to work on it as well, then let us know and we'll put you in touch and you can work on it together. Or if you're looking for, no, I really want to take on a new route, then you can look for something else. Mm-hmm. So one of those, that did come up already. And interestingly enough, it's a route that I had wanted to do, and somebody else said, hey, I also want to do that. So we have started having a discussion about, okay, how do we want to split this up? Do we want to run it together? Do we want to, is one of us wants to run supported and the other unsupported, then we can just coordinate some of our planning. Or the other thing is, if we decide we don't want to run it together and we both want to go the same style, then we can always just figure out who thinks they'll be slower, and the slower person can give it a shot first, and the faster person gets the additional challenge of having a time that they have to beat. Mm-hmm. So we've just started coordinating about that, and we're doing that on our Slack channel. So hopefully that will end up being a good way for people to communicate, to say, hey, I would want to do this route, but I don't want to do it alone. Does anybody want to run it with me? Hey, I want to do this route, but the start and finish are in different places. Can I get help with shuttling? We're interested to see kind of where it goes now that we've given people this tool.
Yeah. So very briefly, practically, we'll have links in the show notes to a website where you have all the information, where people can read all about it. People can sign up for your newsletter, and then will be informed of upcoming meeting dates and how to get connected to the Slack channel and to anything else you're planning. I'm just going to say I created a route a couple of years ago, the Cushman 6 route in the Olympic Peninsula. If anybody wants to attempt it, please reach out to me. I can give all the beta. I can give all the information that is needed. I had last year some folks attempted and they failed. It's a mountaineering route. They actually had to stay up overnight, unforeseen, and they're super strong runners, and I trusted, or I didn't feel bad, but I felt bad in that sense that I wish I could have given them more beta in helping them be successful on this. So if anybody wants to take on that route, please get in contact with me. So
I will keep that in mind. I haven't heard that one yet, but we've just had people start reaching out as they're figuring out their plans for the year. We're just getting a few people to say, yeah, I think that's the one that I want to do. We've got a lot of people right now who said, I think I want to be part of this project, and I think I want to set an FKT, but they haven't figured out a route yet. So if anybody says, oh, okay, maybe I'll take on that Cushman 6, I will totally send them your way.
Perfect. Yes. In your research, did you get a sense how many are really, well, I think that there are two kinds of hard categories. My Cushman 6 is a mountaineering route, so that's hard in a sense that it requires route finding skills and comfort on scree and exposed rock and stuff. But then there are other ones that are hard because they're super competitive. So there's that aspect, like the Enchantments by Leavenworth is reasonably easy. Any trail runner who has run in the mountains can run this, but in order to actually beat any time on there, good luck, right? But how many do you think are ripe for the picking, are just really easy to do? Do you have any percentage sense?
That's hard to say because there is another level of difficulty for some of these, which is some of them are remote. I was just giving somebody some recommendations the other day, and there's a route in, I want to say it's in Southern Oregon, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's just kind of like a long ways from anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about these FKT routes where it's really good to have done some scouting down there, I'm looking at the route description for this route, and I think it's pretty straightforward. There is some off-trail navigating to get to the summit, but I can't tell if the off-trail navigating is just kind of like, well, you just kind of like walk through, or run through or whatever you need to do through some kind of like scree and open ground, or if it really does require a little bit of like, skill to really get to that summit. And since it's such a long ways away, you can't just like drive out there and check it out. You need to take like a long weekend to drive all the way down there, hike up there, find out that it's snow and you can't tell anyways,
Yeah.
So there's some of these that I'm really having a hard time telling how difficult they're going to be. But I would say of the list that I came up with, I feel like maybe half of them should be pretty achievable,
Yeah.
And that's a very rough guess.
Sure.
But, yeah.
That's amazing. Have you been in contact with the guys from Fastest Known Time about this?
Yeah, I reached out to, I think his name is Alex Bond.
Yeah, he's been on my podcast. I was just going to say, he's the Northwest coordinator. He must be super excited about this.
He was, and that was a big relief that, I knew I wanted to make sure that they knew about it, just because he's the volunteer that is going to be approving all these routes, and I kind of wanted to know, hey, we're doing this project. We're signing you up for more volunteer route work. And fortunately, before I even got a hold of him, he saw that Ashley Winchester has heard about our project and thinks it's cool. And so she'd post about it. And he was like, hey, I saw Ashley's post. I think this is really cool. This is going to be a great project. And so I was like, whew, okay, he likes it. That's great. So I did get in touch with him. He was super friendly about it. He was like, yeah, we want to have a lot of people doing this. I'm kind of hoping the project is successful enough that he a little bit regrets saying that, but, we'll see.
I think he signed up for it well, and I think, I mean, if it's so successful, I'm pretty sure he can find help with approving things, especially if they're coming from you, because I think the big bulky work from him is determining if he wants to even approve a route, not so much an attempt. Because I think a lot of people come up with routes, and then he has to determine, how significant is this route? Does it make sense? Is there a route already in the area? So I think that's the part. And then if you are coaching people how to submit these routes, then that will be also, or their attempts, I should say, that will also make it easier for them, right? If women who are going to be running through your program, if you will, right? They will all know how to properly track, how to properly document everything. So I think that should make it easy.
Yeah, I hope so. But like, I feel like I am relatively new to the FKT world, so I'm a little worried that I'm like, there's going to be some detail that I'm going to forget telling people. But hopefully we'll kind of have it. And, we are also thinking about, I'm focused on these routes that are already established that have no women's times, but we also want to see more women being like, hey, maybe I'll make something up. Like, I just want women to be involved a little bit more in all the aspects and trying out some new things. So I'm a little worried about like, okay, can we really coach people to coming up with some good routes and making sure that they're notable? The route that I did was one that I decided, I was like, okay, I'll set this as a new route. And it was a little nerve-wracking that I didn't know how much in advance to submit it. And I'm like, I think this is a really cool route, but it's only 12 miles. It's not you know. So it did get approved. It's a super scenic route. And of course, the day I ran it, it was pouring rain, so I didn't see any of that. But, you know, we'll see how all this goes.
I come from Europe, and I grew up in the Alps. And in the Alps, I mean, by now there are lots of big races in the Alps. But I think what the Alps had before races is they had these iconic routes. And they were mountaineering routes. And obviously that comes a little bit from the way climbers talk about different mountains and not just going to the summit, but which route the climber took to the summit and what season and stuff. And I think coming from a mountaineering world, there's always been sort of this excitement where you didn't need a race and a bib, where people had shared beta and people were excited about people making attempts, right? I mean, going up El Cap, I don't think there's anybody who is pissed when somebody goes ahead and tries to set a new fastest known time up El Cap in Yosemite. Climbers have this sort of cheering each other on, and I think with FKTs we can expand this beyond these obvious races that we've established. And two, FKTs can actually happen in national park lands, in wilderness areas where there is where we'll never see races. And so if we can find a way of encouraging people to safely, responsibly go out into these places, I think it's super cool. I think that's what makes me really excited about these FKTs. And the Pacific Northwest is big. I mean, we could establish 200 more routes and it wouldn't get too busy.
Yeah, that's very true. As I look at Washington State and Oregon State, both of them are pretty well populated with routes compared to some other states, but there are still a ton more possibilities. I've been talking about this as an effort that I'm doing, and I should point out that I have 4 people who are working with me to help coordinate this, because it's way more work than I could do on my own. But one of them has gotten really excited about a bunch of the new routes that she's kind of identifying, that she's like, wait, there's no route for this yet. There's no route here. Mm-hmm. There's no route in Goat Rocks yet. That we could find.
Yeah.
So there still are a ton of possibilities that, if somebody feels like, the way for me to do this is to set a new route, then there's totally great possibilities there.
It's an interesting way, I think, for people to go out and try to build their own route. It's the French in winemaking call it terroir, right? Getting this sense of place. I think anybody who's really serious about trying to establish a route, either they're willing to share something that they've anywhere already done. They know an iconic place they always run, and they say, okay, this needs to be a route. I want to share that. I want to tell the story of this place. Or they go somewhere where there's really sort of still a white dot on the map, and they're saying, I want to see if I can build something here. And so there is something sort of exploratory, adventurous about this that makes me super excited. I think a few episodes ago I was just saying that I don't have any projects for 2022 lined up yet, and I'm stewing, and this conversation gets me excited about coming up with something.
I think the possibilities are in there. I mean, you kind of, if you finish a big goal, you sort of necessarily have to have this little down period, because you finish one goal and you aren't moving on to the next thing yet, and so you kind of need a little time to I think that's one of the episodes I listened to, because I remember you talking about this.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah.
No, it's true.
Yeah. So you are exactly primed to come up with a project like, analogous to this one in some way, where you're like, oh no, that's the thing I want to focus on now.
I know. I probably shouldn't try to establish any new FKTs in 2022, because that will make your percentage a lot harder if I'm going to put new routes up and have men's finishes. So perhaps I come up with something that I have to work on all year and then do it in 2023 or so.
this isn't about the men not doing things. So if you think that if you have a route that you'd like to put together, but by all means put it together. If you wanted to help us out, I guess, and you want to put a route together, then let us know, and we'll see if we can put a woman or a woman's team over there to like run it around the same time or shortly after.
Like, oh, yes, I like that.
More than I would necessarily need, but I'm, like I don't want men to run any less FKTs. I just want more women to be involved in it.
Yeah.
And so, for that matter, if dudes want to get a little bit, competitive and be like, I'm going to set an extra FKT this year, like I say, go for it. And I should mention, if guys want to be involved in our project this year, that's great too. We totally can use supporters. We've got some side goals, where we would count like some mixed gender times in a couple of places. So like, it's not that men can't be involved. We're just like trying to really support the women along.
You make a good point. It is not just about the numbers and beating some arbitrary goal, because doing an FKT, working on a project, even if you're not end up setting the fastest time, but it is such a fulfilling adventure and experience out there. This which starts already in this pre-planning phase, right? It's not just showing up at the trailhead. I mean, you have to figure out what routes are out there, and especially right now when the weather is gross and there's anyway snow anywhere, everywhere we are, right? I mean, right now is the planning phase. Right now is the time to look at maps and Strava and whatever to get inspired.
Right now is the planning phase, and it's also the phase where, like if you're putting in some early base miles, you kind of need a little bit of a goal to work towards. And so we're kind of, we definitely are putting it out like around this time for exactly that reason. Like you can't just decide in August that you want to set an FKT this year for a lot of these routes. And there will be a couple that I think don't need quite as much planning, but a lot of these do take quite a bit of planning and quite a bit of work. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Well, super. Why don't you share with our listeners, and as I mentioned, we'll have links in the show notes and anywhere that people can easily click on, but share people how they can reach out to you and get to know more about the project and be in touch with you.
The easiest place is probably through Instagram.
Okay.
We have a Women Who FKT Instagram account, and there's a link there to our webpage. The other thing you could try is you can just Google us, Women Who FKT. And I tried it this morning, and we are showing up in the top of the Google results now. And the other results at the top, I think there were other articles that were related to us, so you get to us there. So Perfect. Those are the probably best pieces of advice.
Awesome. So that's how people can get in contact to ask any kind of further questions, or if they caught the bug and want to get involved in this FKT setting for 2022. Amazing. So how many FKTs do you have planned for yourself? How many attempts do you
myself? It's funny because I feel like my goals are somewhat getting sidelined to the project as a whole.
Oh no! I hope you're not just an administrative person.
No,
this year.
I am definitely not just administrating. But I feel like for me, like getting the project off the ground is more important than any particular FKT.
Sure.
So I do have one that I'm starting to plan. Probably with another one of our members. That's still a little bit to be decided. We just started talking about it. But like there's one in the Mount St. Helens area I'm looking at. And then I'm kind of hoping that for myself, I can think about this as broadening my experience with FKTs. And so for that, instead of being like, this is the one I want to do, I think what I want to do is make sure that I do a variety of FKTs, like make sure I do one by myself and one with somebody else. Make sure that I do a supported and an unsupported. and I haven't figured out what all kind of the categories that I want to hit are, but I'm kind of hoping that I can get like, maybe 3 to 5 will sort of depend on what, do I end up choosing a bunch of really big ones, or maybe some kind of like smaller ones that are easier to pair with things. So that's still getting sorted out, but yeah. And then the other thing, I am encouraging people to take on some of these not easier, that's totally the wrong word, but some of these more accessible things. Yeah. So I'm kind of waiting to see what other people latch on to, and then I'll kind of take some other stuff.
Okay.
So we'll see what that ends up being. And I've got my eye on some things, but we'll see what actually ends up kind of falling out. So
that's amazing. I love this project. I think it's fantastic. Getting more people, getting more women involved, and going out there, I think is super cool. I don't know. I had this thought, and I don't know if shoot me down if you think it's not right. Do you think women statistically have less interest in the nerdy planning part, or is it the less competitive nature? I don't know if it's bad stereotyping, but why do you think less women have put routes up today?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of the research that has come out about women in kind of sports more generally, oftentimes some of the things that will come out of that are how women are more likely, how to put this, not as likely to kind of round themselves up, I guess. To say, oh, that's just for fast people. Whereas guys are more likely to be like, well, I'm fast enough. So I think that's one thing that can be playing into it, is a little bit of a reticence to like put yourself out there in that way. Mm-hmm. I think, another thing is just that there are fewer women coming to trail running. I think women have a different relationship with safety in the backcountry, which is not to say that like women don't have like the experience or they're not bold enough. It's more just, like I said, our relationship to safety is different. And so that can make a difference in how you approach an individual route or an individual project, or, just some of these like backcountry experiences.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Marta, did we talk about everything? Did we touch on everything?
The one thing that we didn't get to that I did kind of want to talk about is I mentioned that in addition to our big flip the statistics in Oregon and Washington goal, we've got some other side goals to kind of help us get there, because like we are trying to make the sport of trail running more inclusive and in a broad sense. And so we didn't want to just be like, okay, just set your FKTs in Oregon, Washington, that's it. Like we wanted to include as many people as possible. So if anybody anywhere in the US or in the world is like, I think this is a cool project, reach out to us, tell us about what you're doing. We're going to love hearing about some FKTs that are set in like February or March in the warmer parts of the country, and we will include you in the bragging somewhere if you tell us about it. We're wanting to get more new women doing this, so we're trying to keep track of how many women who've never set an FKT before set an FKT due to this project, and that doesn't have to be in Oregon or Washington. We want more women from underrepresented groups to be included in the sport. And so if you're inspired by this and in some underrepresented group of any kind, tell us about your project and tell us about what you're doing and that you want to be counted, and we'll count you in that, So please reach out to us. And I guess the other thing is, the only reason we're limiting ourselves to Oregon and Washington is because that was kind of all we could handle as 4 people or 5 people with full-time jobs. So if you're like, in Utah somewhere and you say, oh, this sounds really cool, I want to be involved, and I think I have time to like get some other women jazzed about it, I will totally share with you anything that we can so that you can get a similar project going in, you know, Utah or Wisconsin or Maryland or Florida, or I don't care.
Yeah.
We will share anything we can to get, you know, other women kind of inspired and jazzed to be doing this.
I love it. I'll be reaching out to my runners in Germany to say, hey, what do the statistics look like over there? I think over there it's a little easier because I believe there are lots of really established hiking trails that, you know, some of them exist like since the Roman times and stuff. And so they are iconic trails, and so people know to run them. They have names and stuff, and so they're obvious FKT routes, but they are not full-on backcountry wilderness. Sometimes they are, you know, loops around medieval cities or something. And so I'm curious what the statistic looks like in areas like that because of the backcountry issue possibly not being as much of an issue.
Yeah, that could make it a very, very different story over there. Yeah. You know, I don't know. All I know is that I can kind of see what we've got here, and I'm like, we could do better.
Yeah, no, for
Let's
sure.
Let's do a big push. Let's have fun doing it. You know, we're considering having some kind of like group camping events or something around some different routes, but I don't want to say too much about that because I'm worried I'll overcommit myself. But we got some other ideas brewing in the background.
It sounds like you're starting something very, very big. This is very cool.
It's already been much bigger than I expected. Like there've been a couple of times where I'm like, wow, this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, with all of this work, I very much appreciate the time you gave us on coming on this podcast and sharing your inspiration, your running journey, and this incredible project. I hope people reach out to you. I hope that people will get inspired and start looking the Fastest Known Time website and just looking at routes and seeing what's possible and seeing if they want to attempt a route like that. I think it's fantastic, especially because races are not everything, and races are still somewhat sort of in an iffy situation with COVID and stuff. I think I'm trying to be a race director, but I still feel very unsure about the idea of bringing people together and really embrace the community aspect, because we're still trying to not hug each other kind of situation. And so I think in between we need something to look forward to. We need something to motivate us and inspire us. So this is
it. I really appreciate you having me on, because I as you saw, I got super excited talking about this. I got so excited I forgot what I was talking about at times. And it's been really inspiring to see how many women have picked up on this and been like, oh, wow, that sounds really fun. And to hear the fact that you're calling and saying, hey, tell me about what's going on here and how you got started and why you're doing this. Like that just, it's just really, really great to see. And I feel like we may have latched on to something good here. So
fantastic. Yeah. I think I need to already pre-book you for sometime in the middle of the year or so to kind of have a status update to see how things are progressing, to get an update where you're at.
Middle of the year, or maybe next fall as things start winding down. I could see being very busy right about July.
Yeah, that's true. You might not have a lot of time to breathe, and with snow melting out, middle of the high running is like anyway like September.
August, September could be very busy, but
no, it's true.
I would love to tell you how this goes, in fall or winter of next year. So
yeah, fantastic, Marta. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And again, links to everything and how to reach out to Marta directly, and how to get in contact with the project will be in the show notes.